And now we will be pleased to hear from Professor Edward Bateman, an award-winning artist whose work has been exhibited in over 28 countries. Already, in the green room, which is not green, I've learned that there may be more to the color red. I'm very excited to hear from Professor Bateman about his art and scholarship, for which he has been recognized around the world for his innovation and creativity. So, next up.
I am absolutely fascinated by color. And I found myself wondering lately, is there anyone who has never been stopped in their tracks by an amazing sunset? I know for me, it can totally leave me speechless. I imagine there's a couple of you out there tonight who at some point have asked your partner, does this outfit work? Do these colors go together? Or perhaps some kind and helpful soul has suggested maybe your color choices just aren't making it. When it comes to color, we are all fans, critics, and maybe a little bit uncertain. How did it go the last time you had to choose a color of paint for your home? There are a lot of options, but few really clear choices. So let me start with an image, and I want you to think about this. You probably recognize this is Vincent van Gogh. The black and white image clearly shows you the bandaged ear, and it appears like maybe a horizon line behind him. But ask yourself this, what is color adding to your experience of this work? And can you put it into any kind of words? Many have tried to assign colors very specific meanings and ideas, things like emotions, and it never really works. It's always contradictory and culturally specific. Color seems to be one of those topics that's hard to put into words. Now, I've asked a lot of artists how they make their color choices, and the answers are almost always, it's intuitive and based on years of experience. The challenge is I can't teach intuitive. But intuition has to have some foundation, something that's going on there. But what? That's the kind of problem that can leave an art professor awake late at night. So I've spent the past 3 years researching color. And it's a discipline that involves so much. It's not just about art, but it involves physics and chemistry and psychology, neuroscience, and history. It's a lot to absorb. And so I've looked at 400 years of art making and found a couple of consistent patterns that I've seen over and over and over in this. Now, all of that art is not just our cultural heritage, it's a tremendous source of data. But making sense of what all that data means, that has been the challenge. And I started by looking at one group of artists, the Impressionists, and those who came after, because no group was more experimental with color than they were. Why? I think that can be explained by 2 things. The first is paint in tubes. Now, prior to this, if you wanted a specific color of paint, you would have to grind your own pigments, mix it with oils, simply make your own paint from scratch each time. You're not going to get very experimental with color if that's what you have to do. So, suppose you want a little dab of yellow. You have to mix all those colors, make paint, and store it in pigs' bladders. Seriously. And you can trust me on this, that is something you can't get from Amazon. So this other item is the gentleman you see on the other side. This is Monsieur Chevreul, who for 50 years was the head of the French National Academy of Sciences. And he took on the challenge of trying to figure out why Yarns from the same color lot would look differently when woven into tapestries. And that resulted in a book titled On the Law of Simultaneous Contrast and Its Application to All the Visual Arts, sometimes called the most influential book on color that no one has ever read. But French artists knew all about this. And that's one of the reasons why France became the powerhouse in art until World War II. They had a solid theoretical understanding of color and ready access to paint. So let's understand a little bit about color and what simultaneous contrast is. Now, simultaneous contrast isn't an art rule. It's something we are all born with. It's part of the way our minds work. If you think about it, our minds love contrast so much that they enhance the contrast of what we see. So let's do a little sort of start from the beginning. We see only a small part of the electromagnetic spectrum, that area between infrared and ultraviolet. And then our brains do something truly remarkable. They take the two ends of that spectrum and they loop it into a ring, into a circle that we call the color wheel. That's pretty remarkable. Now, those colors that have the most simultaneous contrast, the most color contrast, are opposites on the color wheel, kind of like the top circle that you see. We call those colors complementary colors. And you should also know that you can have two colors together that have a complementary color. It forms kind of a Y pattern. And that's something you'll see over and over and over, that Y pattern. Now, I could show you a full museum worth of examples of this with names that you all know and would recognize, but I'm going to focus on three. Let's start with this image by Renoir. As you can see, there's almost 300,000 colors in the image. And I have the advantage, I can use computers to analyze colors in ways that artists of the past were never able to. So how do you make sense of that? Well, one of the starting points is to average out those colors so you're not distracted by all the other tones and values in it. And so one of the things I began to find out is complementary colors, opposites, were appearing. So you can see in that circle chart the colors of the flesh tones and the background. And directly across from that is the blue that you can see in the girls' dresses. He wanted those girls to stand out, so he painted them in complementary colors. Here's what it originally looked like. If we take away those complementary colors, we get this. Here's the work going back 200 years from Vermeer. Thank you. And you can see the same pattern happening. All those colors bunched up on one side and the blue on the opposite side of that. I find that once I show you this chart, people get it. Okay, let's go to around 1910. Here's Matisse. You see that same Y pattern, but it's going a different direction. So these aren't color palettes, these are color relationships that I've been seeing over and over again. Now, for the longest time, my wardrobe consisted of black and gray. But as I began to study color, it started to creep into my wardrobe. So I bought this shirt, and people started saying, "Ooh, I like that color," which was a big surprise for me. That had never happened before. So I charted those colors, and as you can see, they match the pattern. So I went and bought 4 more of those. And so I believe now that I can teach anyone to see color like an artist. It really only takes someone to point out what to look for. And I have found that that can really change the way that you see the world and art. Again, this pattern appears in that original Van Gogh I showed you, the work of Japanese woodblock printers, Tibetan artist work that you'll see in the museum right now, and especially even sunsets. I promise you, if you get to know color better, you'll see the world very differently and probably bring a little more color into your life.